everybody, and welcome to Win Championship Traits for Life, a show focused on strengthening the mental fitness of athletes, coaches, and anyone and everyone that works on a team at any level. I'm Lee Elias, and that's JB Spizzo, and we are joined today by former pro goaltender Mike McKenna. Mike played hockey at the collegiate, minor, and professional levels as a goaltender, and he played over 550 games between the ECHL, AHL, and NHL with multiple teams. Of course, he played 4 seasons for St. Lawrence University before being drafted by the Nashville Predators in the 2002 NHL Draft. He is the volunteer coach right now for St. Lawrence University and a coach with 44 Vision Hockey, in addition to being the host of 2 podcasts, the Suitcase and the Scribe with Scott Burnside, and the 6 Degrees with Mike McKenna podcast, where he has interviewed some very high-profile NHL goaltenders and executives. But today, Mike, you're on our show. You're our guest. This is your time. Awesome to have you with us here today.
Oh, thank you so much, man. It's this is the type of medium I love. I just love sitting down and just talking, man, like, especially when it comes to hockey. And I know I have such a diverse background and story that it's pretty easy pickings, but I'm curious what you might throw at me, because I got a pretty good amount of experience here. And of course, sitting with JB to talk with him again is really cool. So thanks for having me on.
Yeah. Nice to see you, Mike. Thank you.
Hey, and I'll tell you, Mike, the pleasure is all ours. You know, we kind of pride ourselves on asking those questions, as I told you before the show, that don't typically get asked. And as you said, your story is really one worth looking into. There's a lot that everyone can learn from it, both on the athletic side, the personal side, the professional side. So we're just as excited to have you too. But before we dive deeper into that, why don't you just tell us how you fell into goaltending, the position, and kind of your life leading up to college?
Yeah, well, so this was an internal debate for a very long time of mine on why people become goaltenders. And I was dead set that there were 3 reasons. And the first one was, okay, you've got an older sibling who put you in the net and shot pucks at you.
Right.
So I'm an only child. That's not me. The other one that I thought was, okay, the equipment is unbelievable. It's so cool. The masks, the gear, the colors, you can design it yourself. That was me. Absolute gear nerd. I just loved it. I was very lucky, though, that my grandfather and my dad were off-ice officials for the St. Louis Blues. So I got to go to virtually every home game.
Right.
They used to pay the off-ice officials with a couple tickets, and now they're actually paid by the league, which is a good thing. They're held to a standard. But that got me in the door, for a regular middle-class kid from suburban St. Louis. It got me a chance to watch hockey in person. And I'd go early and I'd look at the equipment on the goalies, and I fell in love with that aspect. So that was me. And then, there's a couple other reasons why. One of them has gone by the wayside. It used to be if the kid was out of shape or couldn't skate, put him in the net. Now goalies are actually athletes. So that one's kind of gone by the way. And the other one was that some players just didn't want to get off the ice. They liked being on the ice. I found that one out later on when I was talking to Craig Anderson, and that was his reasoning. And now I've found more people like that. So I just gravitated towards it. Greg Millen was my first goalie hero for the St. Louis Blues, and then Curtis Joseph and Grant Fuhrer. And it was basically who was in net for St. Louis when I was a kid.
Right.
I had other heroes. Ron Hextall. I saw him score a goal and thought, this is what I want to do. But that was really it. I was so drawn to the equipment, and my family played the game. So it was a natural progression for me.
Mike, amazing. Great to see you again. Mike, I don't know if everybody had called you that, but, for me, you were a hockey player, but you're also a professor. You were a professor at your craft. You were a professor at the way you treated others. We have a lot of great folks on this show, and I'm always talking about leadership and everything else. But I got to tell you, Mike, there's a short list of people that I can say were influential leaders for their teammates and for me. And without a doubt, your quiet professionalism was it was bar none. It led the way. I mean, I saw you obviously in San Antonio and Springfield and Florida and Columbus, and you just brought that every single day. And I was just like, man, this guy is steady Eddie. Like, how does he do that? And people can understand professional sports, but there's a difference between the NHL and the AHL and the ECHL. And that's a grind. That's really, really tough. And so when we talk about like mental fitness and mental preparation, Talk us through your routine and how you did this for 2 decades almost.
Well, first, I'm incredibly flattered of you to say that, considering the number of people that you've been involved with in the game and outside the game, the things that you've done within the military and in life in general with leadership. That's incredibly flattering to hear. It wasn't really conscious. It was just me, and I'll tell you what, JB, it's a good thing that you met me later in my career and later in my life, because when I was younger, I was pretty high strung. And I was emotional, and I really wore that on my sleeve as a player, practice. And it, as I got older, first I got a dog, and that really took my mind off hockey when I'd walk out of the rink. Okay. And I know that sounds crazy, but the dog made a difference, and he's still kicking at 13 and a half years old. He's diabetic, blind, deaf, but he's our buddy. He's still going. And then as I get older, you get married, you have kids, and you come home from the rink and you just realize, man, there's so much more to life in hockey than your one job. And it's true for anything. It's not just what you do to make a living. And, I always put a lot of stock into what my grandfather was known for was helping everybody learn the game around St. Louis. He was one of the founding fathers in our city. And there's a plaque with his picture on it in Kirkwood, Missouri, where I grew up playing. That says under his picture, it says, you make a living by what you get, but you make a life by what you give. And it just stuck with me, from a young age. And I was never perfect. I mean, I made plenty of mistakes, but I think that I was always good at owning up to those and realizing when I did something wrong and when there needed to be a conversation and not running and hiding from it. I felt like I was good at that. And I think that had a lot to do with my mentality. When I played was, I knew I wasn't going to be perfect. I knew I wasn't a hotshot prospect. I knew that my role in the game involved mentoring. It wasn't just about being a hockey player. It was also about making my teammates better, trying to help young kids find their way as an adult in life, helping my goalie partner become the best he can possibly be. And I took pride in that. And I don't know if everybody does, but to me, it just seemed like the right thing to do. And I got a lot of gratification out of it. I look at my friends in the NHL now that, they went on to bigger and better things than I ever did. And man, I'm just so amped for them. And in some ways, I feel like, hey, I think I played a part in that, so selfishly that's there. But I think that's also kind of the ultimate litmus test to what you're doing is if your friends and your teammates and your coworkers, if they go on to better things in life, that can reflect back on you.
100%, Mike. I remember a couple times specifically in Portland, just watching you deal with other players. And I was just like, wow, this guy should be running player development. This guy should be running this team. It was just amazing. Your approach to everybody. And I like how you said, listen, I had to learn it. I was a little bit of a fire breather. I got upset because you're exactly right. When I saw you, there was just this consummate professionalism about you. I said to somebody one time, I'm like, if he wasn't playing hockey, he'd be a Green Beret, because, that silent professionalism was what you brought to the organization. And I just think that's so important that you're telling players and coaches that and saying, you know what, I'm continuing to develop, but while I'm developing, I'm also giving. Thank you for that.
No, and I tell you what, I wouldn't have been tough enough to have been a Green Beret. I can guarantee I can take a puck off my shoulder, off my ankle. I can handle that. But what
you'd have been fine.
Thank you. But I tell you what, JB, I have had a really intimate window, and I know I'm going on a bit of a tangent here, but working with the St. Louis Warriors, which is a team that's comprised, St. Louis Blues Warriors are comprised of veterans that all have a 10% disability rating, and they're finding hockey in their adult life. And man, do they ever work together as a team and support one another. And JB, you would know this as much as anybody. For these men and women, it's as much of a support group as it is a hockey team.
100%.
But that's what the locker room is in hockey. It's not just hockey. It's not just winning games. We are a support system for our teammates, for our friends, for our coaches, for our families when we go home. And sometimes that's lost on people. And, it just has really driven it home to me working with these men and women of the Warriors team. And gosh, it's fun though, man. These are people's, JB, who we have a guy with he's a Purple Heart recipient, tough as nails. And this man has been open with everybody, especially in the last month, about what he's been through, how it's been so hard, and how this has breathed life into him. And man, I tell you what, those moments, JB, like, and Lee, like when you can kind of play a part in that again, it's double gratifying. It's huge. It's something I've really enjoyed.
Mike, I'll say a few things here, just going back to all your answers, and you're already an awesome guest. We knew you would be. With the military and team building, and this is kind of how JB and I got hooked up. I've always looked to the military because I think they're the best team on the planet. And when I want to learn about team building, I turn to them. And, I've been blessed in another military show that I do. We asked that question: what happens when you leave the best team on the planet? And the work you're doing with the Warriors, and there's a lot of organizations out there that do similar work, it allows those veterans to be part of a team again, which is kind of cut off almost immediately the day they retire. It's important work, and it also shows the power of teamwork, that these are individuals that have been on a team their entire life, and you're giving that experience again. It's going to lead into my next question in a minute, but I wanted to tell you, I completely relate to what you're talking about with wearing your emotions on your sleeve as a younger hockey player, and I was the same way. And I distinctly remember the day I realized I don't have to play hockey. I choose to play hockey. And it was a big game changer for me, emotionally, mentally, professionally, where I started realizing, like, I can apply the work ethic to anything. It doesn't just have to be hockey. And for the young athletes and coaches out there, I think the fear is sometimes, if I don't look at it like I have to do it, I won't give as much, or I won't work as much. And I just find that not to be true. The last comment I want to say about this, we've been blessed. We've interviewed a lot of amazing guests on this show. We asked Tom Rennie, CEO of Hockey Canada, kind of for his 5 top traits of pro athletes. Just like, when you get to that level, skills obviously there, but what are the differences? And you've already exhibited multiple versions of that. The big one was character. Like right away, you come forward with your character. You're vulnerable. You're willing to talk about it. You're willing to teach. You're a good human being. The ability to be a good teammate. JB just talked about that. Community and service. This is why you're a pro, right? And you still are a pro in those regards. So speaking of, again, I'm just kind of, revisiting some of these things, but it goes into this question. I've been blessed. I got to live in multiple countries. My wife was in the Air Force. I got to move around a lot. And one of the benefits of moving around a lot is you get to see different cultures, different people, different experiences. You moved around a lot in your career, right? A few times, right? For those who don't know, you can look at a stat sheet, but you're a pro nonetheless. But you got to see a lot of different locker rooms at a lot of different levels. So this is one of those questions I don't think you get asked a lot, right? What were some of the best traits of the best teams, and then the worst traits of the worst teams? Because again, you're not a player that was with one team or two teams your whole career. You were all over the place. So I want to know from your experience what you learned about that.
Well, thank you. And I think that is one of the strengths to even what I do nowadays in the analysis world is, man, I've been paid by 15 NHL teams. I've been in locker rooms. I mean, that's half the league. I have intimate knowledge of half the league.
That's right.
Okay. And the players, everyone that goes along with it. And I can say without question that the best teams that I was on were always the teams that got along the best, that were friends on and off the ice, that not just the team, but like the wives and the girlfriends, and they all got along. I can't tell you how much fun is intrinsic to being successful. And now I've been on bad teams that we got along and we had fun. We sucked, but we got along, and it wasn't a miserable season. But I can remember one year I was on a bad team and we finished last in the league, and it was miserable because nobody got along and it all went together. And I think part of that, you need to be supported by your managers and your ownership to create that culture in the first place. You can create it from within, but it's very difficult without the resources to do so.
Right.
And I'll give you a great story on this. I played for the Columbus Blue Jackets for a season in their organization, and that wasn't a deep-pocketed team. Okay, this wasn't the Toronto Maple Leafs with billions and billions of dollars. I can do everything. But I tell you what, we got what we needed. We had a Christmas party where Santa came and they gave the kids a present. We had a couple dinners here and there. Like, they did everything they could to create the culture that was necessary. And it doesn't always take money. It just takes these little events here and there. It takes people getting together away from the rink, away from your workplace. That's what builds a culture. And that's the way it was for me. Those teams that really got along, the year that, I played 2 years in a row that went to the Calder Cup finals, 2 different teams, Syracuse Crunch and Texas Stars in the American Hockey League. And our team in Texas, we went to game 7, we lost to the Marlies. We did not want that year to end because we were having so much fun. Every playoff round we won. We had a barbecue at the park. We played sand volleyball. We had drinks. We were having a great time. Okay. That's exactly what you want to build. And the teams that weren't successful were cliquey. You had players who were upset because the team was screwing them and they weren't getting their chance. And they're, all these expectations that aren't being, and it's like, I always wanted to grab those players and just tell them, you are so lucky to be playing this game. Right. There are no guarantees. The game doesn't owe you anything. Work your hardest and let the chips fall. If you're good enough, you're going to get there. Most kids eventually got that, but there were always some that didn't. And the teams that had too many of those players or players that didn't figure that out, those were difficult years, but thankfully there weren't many of them. And that's where I think leadership comes in. You get enough older players, enough, even young players that just get it in general.
Right.
You can flip a culture really quick and make it a good season.
I want to dive into that leadership aspect of it. And it's an interesting world in sport right now. And Mike, you're feeding right into JB and I's wheelhouse with this, because, our belief is that team bond has to exist for winning to even be possible, much less happen. Right. And a lot of leaders and teams overlook that as, it'll just naturally happen. And our belief is that it's something that can be cultivated and nurtured continually and needs to be done continually throughout the season. And the leaders and organizations that realize that either bring somebody else in and or do it themselves, but it has to be done. I take a look at baseball right now, right? And this is a multi-sport show, so it's actually nice to be able to talk about this. On a lot of shows, it's only strictly hockey. But I look at baseball and sabermetrics and everything they're doing. And you look at pitching. And there's human elements in sports that you can't put numbers next to. And I can't stand it when I'm watching a baseball game, which I don't do too much anymore. Pitcher's having the night of his life. And he's having a night of his life. Nobody on, but he gets his pitch count to 100 and they pull him because that's what the stats say. And it kills me because that guy's having the night of his life. The stats do not matter right now. Right. And there are coaches that rely, the stats say this, and they can't read the person or they can't read the team. All right. And it boggles my mind. So and JB will kill me if I don't ask this from a leadership standpoint, but how important is that leadership to creating that? And maybe how can leadership create that? Again, you've seen lots of different types of leaders in your time.
Reading the room is one of the most important things you could ever have in a leader. There's times to shut up. There's times to get out of the way. There's times to be vocal. There's times to pull people aside. And it doesn't have to be the person wearing the C. You want a whole room full of leaders. Now, not everybody is predisposed to want that role. Some people just don't want it, and that's fine. But you still have to take some ownership in it yourself. And I think for leaders that really I've seen do the best job are the ones that are first passionate and invested. And I don't mean in a monetary way at all. I mean people that are invested into the main goal of winning. And they see it as a selfless endeavor. I've seen captains before who they get that C on their jersey because they've got the big contract and the owner thinks they're the person that should have it. I've seen that happen in a couple cities, and it's just wrong. You don't get the right leader that way, because then the true leaders in the room are stifled by the person wearing the C, because the person with the C is supposed to be the person that's in charge. Right. And it just doesn't work. There's a feeling in a locker room that you know who your leader is, or leaders at least. And I do think that hockey's best run is a benevolent dictatorship. I really do. I think you still, in those moments of the highest of heightened tense situations, you need one person to look at who's going to carry you into that fight, who's going to be able to pull you out of it, say the right things. I think of guys like Jamie Benn in Dallas. I think of Shane Doan in Arizona. Mark Messier, obviously a great example with the New York Rangers. Those players just knew how to read the room and read their teammates. And you know why they could do it? Is because they talked to them all. Okay, Shane Doan. I was a member of the Coyotes for a little over a month. I probably had 3 to 5 heart-to-heart 20, 30-minute conversations with Shane Doan. Why would he talk to me? I'm just a fill-in number 3 goalie that's going to be gone the moment somebody comes back from an injury. But and we sucked as a team, and he still was doing this, but that's who he was as a person. That's why he was the right choice as the captain. That stuff really, you can't force people to do it, but you can guide them to it. And it's so important. Communication, man. Like, and it's with coaches as well. If coaches can't do it, they're not going to get the best out of their players, especially in today's game, that players crave constant feedback. They want to know what they're doing wrong. They want to know how to get better. They want the video. They just want explanations. They want to know why.
Right.
They ask why all the time. And if you're not ready to give the answers to a why question, you probably shouldn't be doing that role as a coach or as a leader. You should just be a follower.
That's a good point.
Man, I love answering those questions. I love to answer those questions. And if I don't know them, I love to find out why I don't know the why question.
Right.
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 You know?
Totally.
And I think it's so important that, coaches and leaders, they allow players to use their creativity.
Mm-hmm.
You obviously saw it, last night with Zegras and Milano.
Wow.
In that game, but you need to allow players to use that creativity. Mike, we might have talked about the story, but when I was doing work for Pittsburgh, Tony Granato was assistant coach, and he was drawing up the power play, and I was in the power play meeting. He let me go wherever I wanted, and I was sitting there watching. He kind of drew it up, and the players left, and I said, "Hey, coach, did you not finish that?" He's like, "Yes, I didn't finish it." He's like, "Because I want 87 and 71 to be creative. I want Crosby and Malkin." He goes, "I want them to do their thing." He's like, "So I'm not going to put him, I'm not going to put him in a box." And I think that's so important today to do that. Mike, I think that, young coaches ask Lee and I all the time, how do we become better coaches? I'm like, become a better communicator.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, there's going to be a time that you're going to have to put the X's and O's on there. Okay. There are times for that. And you also brought up about captains reading the room. In Florida there, I thought Willie Mitchell did an amazing job of it. And I remember the one year we didn't make the playoffs. Everybody was cleaning out their lockers and everything else. And they were kind of chitty chatty and we're going golfing. And he just like sat in his locker. He was getting upset. And then finally he said, "Close the door." And he closed the door and he said, "Hey guys, you see this feeling? This feeling sucks.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not used to, he came from LA. He won 2 cups. He's
That's
like,
right.
I'm not used to this.
Different culture.
He's like, I'm not used to this. And you shouldn't be either."
Right.
He's like, "So when we come back next year, let's, we need to switch it on." And we made the playoffs the following year and that sort of thing. But I thought that was just so important. Like he saw that.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, this isn't going to be the culture. And I think you're right. That how's that culture built? Of course, it has to start at the top. The culture has to be healthy. But then that culture inside that room, that guy to the left and right. Mike, I saw you do it. I saw you turn to a player and the player was not doing the right thing. And you're like, "Hey," and I don't know exactly what you said, but it was something to the effect of, "Hey, you need a cowboy up here." I was like, "Oh, I like it." And this kid was like, this kid had a chance to, play in the show. And you're like, "Hey, you need a cowboy up." And the kid was like, "Oh crap," like think a little bit less of yourself. So Mike, let's just, dive into some of those leadership traits. You said you've learned them along your career. I think that's amazing. And those leadership traits that we want to pass on to players, to coaches, and to young business professionals listening to this podcast. How do I become a better leader? JB and Lee and Mike, how do I do it?
Well, I think it's kind of unique that you picked up on this with me, because goaltenders are typically not looked at to be leaders. They're not the captain. Sometimes coaches won't even put them in the room with a leadership group, which is crazy to me, considering that we see everything. We are the ultimate barometer of what goes on in front of us. We're on the ice the whole time. It all comes at us. If you want somebody to be a leader, you really should have a goalie in there for an entire group. Okay. But we've fed into this discourse that goalies are just weird and you should leave them alone and they let them do their thing. No, goalies are teammates. Goalies are hockey players. And any goalie that thinks that being on an island and not talking to your teammates is the way to do things, I think they're completely incorrect. You cannot read the full picture of your room without that knowledge. And that's the truth for anybody, is understanding every dynamic. If you're a manager of a company, how on earth are you supposed to get the best out of the person who's putting together your widgets on the line if you've never done it? There will always be resentment there from that worker. If you look at the person above you saying, you need to up your productivity because you're not getting enough of those done in time. Why can't you do those faster? Well, I don't know, Mr. Boss Man, because you've never done it and you don't understand how hard this is. That resentment will always be there. And that's the same thing in the hockey world where, if you get a coach that, a great example for goalies, coach will just beat up on a goalie. Why couldn't you make that save? You need to make more saves for us. Okay, well, you've never had a conversation with me about this on maybe why I didn't make that save or how I could have done it better. They don't, sometimes the poor leaders of the world just don't want to deal with it. They just want to say what they think, and that's that. And it's my way, and that's it. Do it my way or we're done. You have to have flexibility. Now, you have to stay true to yourself, and you have to have a game plan and goals and structure and everything that provides success. But you have to have some flexibility to understand how people work and to really mold your relationship with people. Because I'll tell you what, man, like, you come in hot the first time with somebody, it leaves an impression. Okay. Like, and JB, this was important for me when I played. Like, there were times where I realized, I got a little upset at a teammate or something. And I probably came in hot, and in the heat of the moment, whatever. But it was always important for me to come up to that player afterwards and just say, hey man, like, I'm sorry I got off the rails a little bit there. My point is still valid. We still need to do these things better, but I could have handled that better. I'm sorry I came at you like that. It's just me being emotional in that moment. I still really like you. You know what I mean? Like, let's grab a bagel or coffee. Like, and that's really important.
Mike. That's leadership, Mike. And Mike, I'll tell you, I think, there were times that you intimidated coaches, and it's because you are hyper smart. You are very bright. And I think sometimes coaches resented that. And I want all leaders to understand that you should want people smarter than you. But sometimes they're like, why can't he just be a jock and just do what I
just stop the puck? Let's stop the puck.
But Mike, you weren't. I remember you would bring up these conversations in meetings. I'd be like, oh boy, here it goes. Right. And you could see, like, coaches are like squirming a bit, like, I wrote on my notes, Mike is right. But, and I discussed that with him afterwards. But let's talk about that. When you should want that in your organization. Yeah. You should want bright people. You should want input. And it's okay for somebody to have a better answer.
It is okay to not be the smartest person in the room. And by all means, like, it's flattering you say that, but I never purposely went in hot thinking I know everything. I just wanted to add what I felt, and I thought it was important. If I wouldn't say something out loud if I didn't think it was going to benefit our team. And it's not just that you mentor top down, right? And I played in Dallas for that season, and I remember their assistant GM, Scott White, for the first time in my life, used the phrase, you have to manage up. I had never heard that phrase in my life. And this was when I was talking to him afterwards, and I realized, you know what? Some of the teammates that I played with, and really in the goalie world, I have to look at this specifically because it's the best allegory for it. I was mentored by my younger goalie partners, and they didn't even know it. And I was mentored by them because I learned from them. I watched them do things. They taught me things. I mean, coaches, leaders in the world, if you can't learn from the people below you, how do you ever push a company or a team forward? How do you ever become progressive? How do you ever take new ideas and input? And how do you get the best out of people if you're stuck in one way? And that's what I always took it as. I've always been huge on collaboration. And like I say, I do think that the leadership role, hey, coaches are still the coach, and you do have to shut up and listen to the coach when it comes time. But when you have the open forum and open debate and an opportunity to speak, if you feel something and you're passionate about it and you can explain why you need to do that, an organization should crave those type of players because they make the team better. They do. You just have to find the ones that aren't completely, there are some that will do it in a way that it's so confrontational, it just doesn't work. But you do have to understand the personality trait of it. And I think it goes both directions, man. You mentor up, you mentor down. It's a team. It is a team. It's not a singular person on the ice.
Well, what happens is, Mike, and I'll turn this back to you, Lee, is that there are some of these coaches that are that way, right? And they end up winning. So people think, oh, that's the way to do it. And those are the same coaches that the players lock them out of the locker room.
I've seen it before.
And you've seen it before. So,
Mike, I want to follow up too, is you're bringing up some amazing points. One of the things we say on this show a lot, and it's a little quote we use, is that, good coaches know everything, but great coaches know nothing. And that's a
Mm.
quote I tell. And that was one of the pitfalls of my early coaching career. I stepped into coaching in my early 20s, and I knew it all. I knew everything we needed to do, and I knew what we needed to change. And it was my way or the highway. And look, we had success, but I realized as I get older, man, I'm doing this wrong. Like, I'm not open to any criticism. I'm not being vulnerable with my players. There was clearly an ego there, albeit it wasn't a negative ego in the sense of like, I want other people to know how great I am. But just I was believing something a certain way.
Yeah.
And, the ability to be vulnerable here with what you're talking about is multiple directions, right? I love that you said you learned from the younger goaltenders. I always pose to young questions this answer. And this question, excuse me. This is how I pose it. I said, if somebody knows something more than you and you can learn from them, do you want to learn that? The answer is always yes, yes. I said, what if I told you it was a 10-year-old kid? Well, I need to say, I said, no, I'm telling you they know something that you don't know. Do you not want to know that because they're 10? And it's always an interesting conversation because the truth is that's all ego, right? I learn from my younger employees all the time, right? I learn from obviously the people that are older than me. The point is I'm open to learning. And when you create an environment where learning can take place and it's 360 while respecting roles, which is something you brought up, right? Everybody has their role and their job to do. You have to be respectful. It's amazing the accountability. One of the other things about coaching, you made me think of this earlier, and kind of the ego of coaching is that everybody always talks about when it comes to coaching, like the big locker room speech. And I always say that those don't happen when people think they do, right? Like in the movies, it's the big game before the big moment. And don't get me wrong, there are times where that is necessary. But I said, if I did my job right, I don't have to say anything. If I did my job right as a coach, I can walk in the locker room and say, do I need to say anything? Because they're already ready to go because the environment's correct. The leaders have done their job. The big talk usually comes in a downtime. Or my favorite coach right now, Rod Brindamore, walking into a room, spinning around the room for about 4 turns speaking, and then he just leaves as fast as he comes in.
Out of there.
Yeah, just get the heartbeat going every time he's around. But I'd love your take on that because when it comes to coaching again and leadership, and you said this earlier too, and I'll shut up in a minute. It's so important to know how to be led as much as it is to lead. And you said it's okay to be a follower. I want to reiterate that it is okay to be a follower, right? It's also okay to be a leader. These are team dynamics I think we don't dive into enough.
Well, you do have to know your role within a team. And that doesn't say that, like, those roles can be fluid. Right. There are moments to be a follower. There are moments where a person on your team knows way better than you, who maybe isn't a person that speaks often or says anything. There are those moments. In general, you fall into what your dynamic is and who you are, but you should be able to go outside of your comfort zone at times. And, great leaders, coaches, you're exactly right about the big speech. It doesn't happen often anymore. A lot of people, like I coach 8U hockey and the parents are waiting for the big pregame speech, and it's only because they expect it. And they've been fed into this narrative that this is how you coach. Herb Brooks,
right? There's no music in the background when we're talking. Yeah.
Right. And so, during that time frame, for a lot of times, coaches were motivational speakers. That's what they were. That's not today's game. They're teachers. They're herder of people. They're the bond that the glue that binds everybody. That's what coaches are in a lot of ways. You have to want to play for somebody. And by instilling your systems and your mindset, by osmosis, your players take that on. That's how you want to have it happen. You don't want to have it happen with an iron fist of X's and O's. Here. This is what we have to do. Motivational speech. Let's go get them. You want to give the creativity and the freedom to play within your structure. And as we were sitting here, I had to look this up really quick because it reminded me of the economic concept that I studied at St. Lawrence when I was at school, of the invisible hand. Okay. Adam Smith, 1759.
Right.
The invisible hand. Okay. And I want to read it. And again, I go off on tangents, but the invisible hand is an economic concept. Okay. You can think about that in any abstract.
Totally.
That describes the unintended greater social benefits of public good brought about by individuals acting in their own self-interest. The concept was first introduced by Adam Smith in the Theory of Moral Sentiment. So what we're talking about here is people acting in their own self-interest, which is hockey players. We are all selfish. We all want to score goals. We all want to make saves, but we are acting within those parameters for the greater good. And that invisible hand is truly everybody pulling together at the same time. And the coaches that can take the invisible hand and guide the ship are the ones that everybody looks back at and they go, this guy was a hell of a coach. I loved playing for him and we accomplished a lot. So sometimes I'm glad I went to school because I have these things in my back pocket.
Yeah,
but I think about that often.
I'm going to back this one up too for you. I think it was not Rick Nash, John Nash, Princeton University, years later would discover that we're getting really academic here, but I love that you did that because it gives me the pathway to do it too. He discovered, pretty much in short, the theory that you win when you do everything that's best for you and the team and the group. And he mathematically proved that. So for those of you that are science people out there, it's actually been proven in science and math that doing what's best for the team is actually what's best to do. I brought that up, man. There's no shame in that at all here.
Yeah. And let me just take that for a second. Like, there are instances it is okay and encouraged to be selfish.
Right.
Okay. But it's within that greater parameter of the good of the team. You know, you have to know how to utilize that selfishness in a positive way. Like, you have to want the puck. Like, if you're not selfish wanting the puck, you're not going to get it. It's not going to come to you. You know, if you want to go out and be the CEO of a company, man, like, you've got to use that selfish drive in the right way, you know, not be a selfish person, but be selfish in terms of how you process things and make what you do better for everybody. So it's kind of bridging that gap, but it is important.
What's amazing that you're bringing this up today, I'm giving a talk to a team today. And one of the things I'm talking about is exactly what you just brought up, the difference between wanting the puck and needing the puck. The difference between passive and aggressive, right? The difference between playing or winning. And that dives just into what you're talking about being, you know, selfish for the team, right? And also, look, I always like to bring up the word selfishness because it's often misunderstood, right? We're all selfish in our own ways. Greed is an inherent human trait, right? When you learn to accept that, it changes things. What do I mean by that? Well, I love spending time with my kids and I'm greedy about it. I want to spend as much time with my kids as I can. So you can call me greedy, but I think that also makes me a pretty okay dad, right? So I'm just trying to dive into that definition a little bit here because selfishness is always looked at as this kind of massive negativity. But you're right. If you switch the polarity, define it a little bit differently as a coach, as a player, a business person, dad, mom, whatever, suddenly it's a driving force, right? And that's part of that ego too.
And it plays into our successful ways. Like, successful people are driven and they're selfish when they need to be, but that selfishness kind of builds into a selflessness, right? In a way, right. You know what? It's very malleable how we use these terms because, you know, what you're doing, again, if you do it in the right way, on that selfish level, turns into helping everybody and ends up being very selfish. You like to spend time with your kids, and that's considered selfish. It's not selfish, but that's what you want to do. You want to be greedy about the time with the kids. Your kids are thinking, my dad is so selfless that he wants to be with us. Right. And that's, well, you hope. That's what it is. Well, exactly. I mean, I hope my kids think that too. They're back, you know, when I walk out of my closet studio, they start yelling at me and I question everything. But you know, when you put your kids to bed at night, and that I have the opportunity to put my kids to bed at night, tuck them in, put my 8-year-old daughter's 10 stuffed animals in their proper locations and give her a hug and kiss goodnight. I try to make that happen as much as I can.
Right. Totally good.
You know, and that's important.
And that's leadership right now. And that's being selfless. Mike, I love it. Love this conversation. Lee, I didn't realize you were such an academic wizard. You know, I
like Mike to surprise you. JB, I like to surprise you from time to time.
You know, Eastern Louisiana State Tech did pretty good for you, Lee. Good job.
Yeah, Montclair State and Drexel, but I'll take it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
It's just a piece of paper, man.
It really is. Yeah, there's a lot of self-learning going on here, but no, yeah.
100%. Mike, I wanted to ask you a question about, you know, being a superstar in the role asked of you. You know, I think we might have had a conversation, you and I, you know, first round picks are given all these opportunities to make the team. The 7th round pick is given about 2 minutes.
That's it.
And it was so funny because like sometimes we would look and be like, all right, it's time to move on. Well, he's a first round pick. Okay, you made a mistake. But this other kid who's grinding his way and should be on the team is like barely getting a look. And then, you know, GMs and coaches, they see what they want to see. You know, a kid gets called up from the AHL and you're like, that kid shouldn't get called up, but the GM's planning a trade or something else and wants the kid to get seen. So it's a, you know, it's a it's a process which we have to understand. I talked to a young business executive about 3 months ago, and he's trying to climb the ladder in his company. He's very, very smart. He went to a prestigious university. You know, they kind of have him earmarked to be at the top, and he's like, how do I get to the top of the ladder faster? I'm like, the copying machine's out of paper. Why don't you put some paper in it? And he was like, well, it's somebody else's job. I go, no, it's your job.
Mm-hmm.
And I say part of it is, I think when we climb this ladder, we can climb this ladder as fast as we want, right? Never going to tell guys or gal they can't make it to the top level you want to. But as you're climbing this ladder, you have to be a superstar in the role asked of you. And you exemplified that 15 years. You exemplified that. Riding the bus, eating Jimmy John's, 3 games in 3 nights, the sleeper bus. Oh, classic.
I love the sleeper bus.
And if anybody's not experienced that, oh my gosh, I was on a sleeper bus. I'm like, this is, but my point is you're being a superstar in a role asked of you, and you're excelling at it, and you're coming at it with a great attitude. So talk through, we have, again, coaches, young professionals, young players. Be a superstar in a role asked of you. How do you define that?
You can't ever really decide what your role is going to be. You can want it, you can hope it, you can try your best, but at some point you're going to receive a label from management in hockey. And my label was, hey, he's a great American League goalie. Okay. Nobody believed in me at the NHL level because I wasn't their prospect. Okay. I was a draft pick of Nashville. I didn't sign with them. And I went into the great sea of goaltenders to fight my way out of the ECHL. My first year I made $450 a week. I got housing and healthcare in the ECHL. Okay. Didn't get an NHL contract until my 4th year pro. And it taught me to be resilient, but it also taught me I cannot control what my label is. I can try my damnedest to fight my way out of it. I can do everything I can, but it may not change. You can't change the narrative. All you can do is focus on being your best and whatever your role is. And for me, I realized, man, I've got to be a good teammate. I've got to be a good mentor, and I've got to continue to produce results on the ice for me to continue getting jobs. If any of those 3 factors were missing, I don't think I would have had the career I had, because there's so many goalies that go through the American Hockey League, minor league hockey. And there's a reason why I stuck around that long. There's a reason why I'm the winningest American-born goaltender of all time in that league and climb the career wins list, because goalies just don't stay there. And I liked it, man. I loved playing in the American Hockey League, and I loved knowing I still had a chance at the NHL no matter what. Even if my role defined me as one thing, I still had a chance. Even at 33 years old, if I would have gotten a 20-game run in the NHL and I was lights out, I could have changed the narrative. It could have happened. And that
100%.
hope, that glimmer of hope is what kept me going. People ask, why didn't you go to Europe? I'm like, 1, I'm not going to Russia. You can't pay me enough. It doesn't matter. And part of that, Lee, it's actually something you touched on earlier. I didn't have to be a hockey player. I don't have to be a broadcaster. I don't have to be an analyst. I don't have to be a writer. This is true for everybody. So many people in life get so stuck in thinking, man, like I can only be one thing. Bullshit. That's wrong. You can do all kinds of things. And that gives you power to know that you're not just one person. Totally. And, like going back to your question there, JB, I got 2 great examples that go along with it. Marc-Andre Fleury, one of the greatest goaltenders to ever play the game, 3 Stanley Cups. He's going to end up being probably 3rd winningest goalie ever. One of the best teammates in the world. He still picks up pucks every day at practice. He's not doing it. He's not doing it for a show. He's not doing it to stay. Oh, Marc-Andre is such a great guy. Look at him pick. No, he's doing it because that's who he is. That's what he does. He's helping people. He's doing the right thing, and he's loved for it. Another example is somebody that I can think of also came from the Pittsburgh Penguins organization. It was Joe Vitale. And I don't know if you crossed paths with him, JB, maybe a little bit behind your time there, but Joe Vitale was never a superstar in the traditional sense of the word. Okay. Wasn't the team's leading scorer. He wasn't the best player on the ice. But I'll tell you what, he was a superstar 2nd, 3rd line player. He was the best damn 2nd line player you're going to find, responsible, everything. And he carved out a 5-year NHL career because of it. He was never the best player on his team, but he was probably the most valuable on a lot of teams. And that's really what it means. Like, be a superstar at what you're best at, be valuable, be worth something to somebody, be somebody who they can't take out of that lineup, who has to be in the room and on the ice. I love that about Joe. You know, like this was a guy, he played 4 years of high school hockey in St. Louis and carved out an NHL career. Pretty awesome. Really cool.
Beautiful. Mike, you talked about saying, you have, a lot of your teammates, a lot of the people you mentored in the show doing things. And you know what? Though you might not be in the NHL Hall of Fame, hundreds of these young men that you've mentored might be. And that's your legacy, Mike, right there. That's your legacy, is these young men that you've mentored along the way. One or two or three of them, they're gonna be at the ultimate highest place in the honor system. And that's because of you. It's because you took time with these people and you helped them be great at who they are, great human beings. That's your legacy, Mike McKenna.
When you watch people hoist the Stanley Cup that you've played with, or that you've coached,
Sure.
I mean, JB, people that you've worked with, I mean,
yes.
Is there any better feeling? Like, I get chills when I see it. And these are people I was in direct competition with. Direct competition.
Mm-hmm.
Jake Allen, we were goalie partners in Peoria. My numbers were better than Jake Allen's. Guess who got called up? Jake Allen. He was the prospect. But you know why? Because long term, that's what worked better for the organization, and the organization was right. As much as it hurts my ego to say that, they were right, because Jake had more runway. He had more potential. He was younger, and he wins a Stanley Cup with the team. And Jake Allen was one of the best teammates I've ever had. He's still one of my close friends. And I'm so proud of him. I'm so proud to have been part of that, even though we were in direct competition. And you know what? Of course, there was a little jealousy when he got called up and I didn't. There was, because man, when you work hard for something and you feel like you deserve it, you take it to heart, but you can't let that feeling fester, right? It's just what it is. I couldn't control it. It was out of my control. All I could do was do my best job, put my head down, go to work. But I look back on it now, JB, and I watched him hoist the cup, man, I almost cried. Like, I may have been crying at the time, it's amazing and powerful stuff, because not many people get to do that on earth, to reach the pinnacle of what they do in the world.
That's right.
I thought we weren't giving locker room speeches, but you guys are making me want to run through a wall right now, which is good. I thought you never know when they're going to happen. That's what we said. So, Mike, we got a few minutes left, and again, you've been amazing, and as anticipated, I should say. What's funny is that that common struggle, we say that iron sharpens iron here, and I love that you said a minute ago about Jake Allen. What you did was identify what you were feeling, right? You said, I'm feeling something. It's a little jealousy. Okay, I'm feeling it. I understand that. I'm going to focus on what I can control. That is a really quick how-to guide for all the listeners out there to move past something. And it happens to you throughout your whole life. I just went through something last week where I was having trouble identifying what was bothering me. But as soon as I did, I was able to kind of, okay, now we're moving this direction. Mm-hmm. We don't do that enough. What you said it, you fester in your emotion, your misery, and you want the pain for whatever reason. There's a lot of psychology here, but the point is, if you can identify what you're feeling, why you're feeling it, you can turn a corner. Coaches, especially goaltenders, you have to do that. You said earlier about the leadership group and how some teams don't have goaltenders in there. Can you have a leadership group in Tampa Bay without Tom Brady, Vasilevsky? I mean, can you do this? Like it's one of those things I think about. Like, can you, goaltenders never get the respect they deserve, but it's one of those things you wouldn't make a leadership group without a quarterback. Right. You wouldn't make a leadership, and you are the quarterback as a goaltender. It's underappreciated position most of the time. That's what I'll say. All right, listen, before we go. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. I should let you go.
I was just going to say, it's funny, you look at baseball and pitchers make $40 million a year, quarterbacks in football, $40 million a year, but man, they will not pay a goalie $10 million like they do the forwards, right? Apparently we're voodoo. No, actually we're very team dependent in what our numbers look like. So it is what it is, man. Like, what are we going to do? Be mad about it? Like, you can still be a number one starting goalie in the NHL, make $6-7 million. I think that's a pretty good living. But it is funny how out of whack it is. It is out of whack though, when you look at it, because man, people always talk about, hey, you can't win without a goaltender. You need great goaltending to win Stanley Cups. You'll never win a Stanley Cup without goaltending. Well, then we induct 2 goaltenders into the Hall of Fame in like the last 15 years.
Right. It doesn't make sense.
You know what I mean? Like it's one of those things. Again, we can't control it. We're self-flagellating people in general as goalies. We're used to being beat up like this, and it becomes a punchline. Look at me, I'm like laughing about it.
Yeah, well, you're resilient. This is your resilience shining through. It's funny. One of the conversations I have with a lot of fans, right? And there's nothing wrong with being a sports fan, but sports fans tend to kind of fall into this, like they know the people on the team and they don't even ever interact with them. And one of the things I talk to fans about is that, and not in a mean way, but I say you don't understand how replaceable most of the team is. There's 4 or 5 players really not replaceable, but most of your second, third, fourth line, the bottom half of your D, they're interchangeable, right? So where I'm going with this is, and we talked about this before the show, JB, if you give me a minute with this one, this will be great. You had this unique experience with the Philadelphia Flyers. You were one of many goaltenders that played with the Flyers when they set the record for most goalies played in a season, and most of it due to injury. But I remember when they called you up, and it made me think this question I've always wanted to ask you, right? So you go up, you go down, you go up, you go down. The mental resilience you have to stay focused must be insane. Now, and again, from your point of view, it might be, oh, I've always been doing this, but I have to ask for the audience because I know young athletes, and JB and I talk about this all the time. I got to go to this team to win. I got to go to that team to win. There's so much pressure, right? You just kind of did what you had to do to keep going, and you got that call up and back down. How do you do that? What is the resilience message that you have? How do you teach young athletes and coaches to make that stream of consciousness to become the winningest goaltender, American goaltender in the AHL? How does that happen?
That season in particular was the hardest of my career. And to be honest, I was massively depressed for a lot of the season.
Wow.
I mean, I spent about 4 months away from my family. I got called up by Ottawa. I got traded to Vancouver for 2 days. I got claimed off waivers. I went to Philly, and then I went to Lehigh Valley, then back to Philly, then Lehigh Valley. And I cried more that year than I can remember. I'm usually like a once or twice a year cry guy. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like just things get
that.
to me and I break down.
Right.
And that was kind of my normalcy. And that year was tough. But what I found was that, and I think maybe I drew some of this from coming up from a racing family. If this strikes a chord with anybody, that racing's dangerous. And I can probably name a handful of friends of ours that were killed racing. My dad's friends. And somebody gets killed, racers race. That's how it used to be. It was so morbid, but that's what it was. JB, I'm you can relate to this. Okay. It's just what you do. And
exactly.
I felt as a professional and as a goaltender that it's what I did. It's what I signed up for. It's my job. I'm here to perform, and I have a commitment and a duty to do that. But I also made sure that I found out that I let it be my happy place. That was the point where once I put this gear on, I put the mask on, I could just be myself and forget everything. So I took the ultimate enjoyment out of what I was doing on the ice. Those couple hours I got to just forget everything. And that's what racers do. They get in the car, they put the visor down, they put their hands on the wheel, and they drive, and they're not scared. And I think that stuck with me. And it just, it was a sense of duty. It's what I did, but I was happy. And I've had those conversations with young goaltenders. What happens when a puck goes past you? What are you thinking? Oh, I've got to stop the next one. And then I did this wrong and this wrong. And I remember telling a goalie this year, I was like, hey man, the next time a puck goes in, I want you to think about what makes you happiest. What? They go, what makes you happy? I don't know. Being on the beach, throwing a football around. I said, the next time a puck goes in practice, you're thinking about the beach and make it sandcastles. And the next week he's like, hey, that actually kind of worked. I was like, yeah, even if it gave you 2 seconds of happiness, it brought your mind back to where it needed to be, that you're having fun doing a sport. It's a sport. It's a game. And so that was it for me. It was my happy place. I probably only had one moment in my life I can think of, and it was in college where everything went wrong. This was like second year, sophomore in college at St. Lawrence. I'm not playing. I've basically been benched. I haven't been good enough. Other goalies playing. Girlfriend breaks up with me. Like that, a relationship just goes totally sideways, like at Thanksgiving time. This all happened kind of the same week. I can remember being on the ice and crying under my mask. And I just remember thinking, Mike, get your shit together. Like, what are you doing? You're on a college scholarship, D1 hockey, girl, she broke up, whatever. Figure it out, Mike. Come on. And that's a cowboy up moment, AJB. And I finally just went, this is enough.
Absolutely.
This is enough. The next week I put myself in goalie classes, but with myself. I went to goalie school. I grabbed shooters and friends. I said, hell with this, man. I should be having fun. And I pulled myself out of it. That was a turning point in my career. By junior year, I was playing again. But that was the one moment where it just, things weren't right. And I just had to kick myself in the ass and go, man, like, look at what you have in life. You got it pretty easy, man. Let's go.
Like, you're bringing up a trait, bringing up a trait of the greats,
it.
and it's the ability to snap into the present moment. And it's really hard to do. And if you can learn to do it, exactly what you said happened. You can snap yourself out of any situation or most situations, get back to the present moment and move forward. And the highest performers like you do that, right? I've loved every second of this interview. We're going to have to do a part 2.
I think so. I have so much more to talk about. Let's please do a part 2.
I know. I could be all time restraints. The FCC is going to call, which is really just JB. But JB, any closing thoughts before? I know you have to go in a minute.
No, I just, Mike, look, I took a page of notes so you can tell when you're a great guest, because I'm writing notes like crazy because I use these notes to make myself better. A couple of things I thought you said about collaboration, add value, manage up, finish what you start. Mike, you said that, finish what you start. Now, maybe not those exact terms, but when you were saying that, Mike, you're amazing. You're a wonderful guest. You're going to be a GM or a team president if you want to. You keep grinding away because you're setting the example for others to follow.
Thanks, JB. Well, I learned a lot from you, and so it was both ways. And I'll tell you what, Lee, when you walk into the locker room and you've got somebody with the cloud of JB, what he's done in life, and you see him pull out that notepad and start taking notes, like, people notice that stuff. It takes a precedence.
Some of the coaches didn't like it because they thought I write notes about them. And I was just like, the locker room needs to be cleaner or something.
I'll tell you.
But you know what? We had success, man.
Yes,
we were good. And
Mike,
there's a big part of it. So.
Yeah, I will tell you that I'm honored to be on this show with JB every week. And they always say you are who you surround yourself with. I'm with JB multiple times a week and with amazing guests like you every few days. And I'm super blessed. And I just want to thank you, both of you and JB. Now I'm saying, but Mike, you're just an awesome guest. This was phenomenal. I'm not kidding about a part 2. We're going to get you scheduled for that.
So good.
I just want to end by thanking you for all you do as a leader, as a hockey player, everything you do in your life as a dad. I just think you're a phenomenal human being. So thanks for being on today.
Anytime. Thank you. I can't wait to share this with everybody.
Yeah, us too.
Thank you, Mike.
Us too. So that's going to do it for this episode of Win Championship Traits for Life on Grit. We're a pivotalmomentsmedia.com channel. Check us out. We got educational stuff there on mental fitness. We got more content. We got all the episodes of Win. But for Mike McKenna and JB Spizzo, I'm Lee Elias. We'll see you next time, everybody. Have a great day.